Everybody, welcome back to Patriot to the Core podcast. I am Thad Forrester. Appreciate you tuning back in and listening. This week's guest is Justin Constantine, and I was introduced to him relatively recently, and I'm kind of surprised I wasn't aware of Justin before now, but I hope you'll feel the same way after hearing from him. Before I get to Justin, I did want to just go and read an iTunes review. This is from Lindum Enterprises. I believe that's Lindum ENT anyway. And it says, for more than 6 years, I've been an avid podcast consumer. I subscribe to several podcasts and spend all my drive time hours listening and learning. This podcast is great because it features interesting and compelling guests, and the host asks great questions. Appreciate that. Also, I highly recommend Thad's book about his brother, who is the ultimate inspiration for his work. So that was a 5-star review, and I know who that was. That was Matt. And so Matt, I appreciate that. You'll probably be on the show as a guest at some point in the near future. So please go and rate the podcast. You can just give it the starred ratings, but you could also actually write a review, which is even better. So appreciate everyone listening and sharing, and so please continue to share it, and you can copy the links and email it out to people, or share it on Facebook or wherever you want to. I want to get in now to Justin Constantine. This is going to be a really good interview. Justin actually he volunteered for deployment to Iraq in 2006 as a civil affairs team leader. And he ended up being shot in the head by a sniper. It was back behind his ear. I think his left ear. It came out his mouth. So you can imagine the damage that was done. So he's going to talk in detail about that. But he's also just accomplished quite a bit since that accident, I should say, since he was shot by a terrorist. He's on the board of directors for the Wounded Warrior Project, Give an Hour, and Semper Max. Also, in 2011, he was the Secretary of Defense. The Secretary of Defense appointed him to serve on a 4-year congressionally mandated task force for recovering warriors. All kinds of stuff. He's been named a champion of change by the White House. He's been on all the major news outlets multiple times. Written articles for different magazines, including Men's Health. So just the list kind of goes on, and he's a coach and a speaker now, and a motivator, inspirational speaker, and he really has I think a lot of inspiration to share with us. So I'll bring in Justin now. Justin Constantine, thank you very much for being on the show. It's an honor to have you. I have to say, a few weeks ago, I got a call from Johnny Yellock, who was actually episode number 1 of the podcast, and he said, "Hey, have you talked to this guy?" I said, No. So I looked you up and watched several videos of you on various news outlets and videos on your website, and I read about your book. So there's plenty of info out there about you. So welcome. Thank you, Justin.
Thanks, Dad. It's an honor for me to be here. I really appreciate you inviting me. And yeah, Johnny, I'm glad to hear Johnny was guest number 1. Johnny's a special guy, and we all have lots to learn from him.
Yeah, he's very motivating. In fact, a friend of ours came up to me at church Sunday, and she had just started listening to the podcast, and she said, "Hey, that Johnny Yellock, I really, really digging him. He's very interesting." So. But I mean, you're really along the same lines, and so you've got an incredible trial, or maybe you'd say trials that you've overcome and maybe are still dealing with. And so I'd like to, if you just explain to us really, like, what do you do now for a living?
Sure. Although my background is as a lawyer, I practiced law for 15 years, and on active duty in the Marine Corps, I did criminal defense and criminal prosecution. And then a bunch of different things in the reserves. When I deployed, I was with an infantry unit doing civil affairs. I wasn't there as a lawyer. But I quit practicing law about 3 years ago. My last job was as a lawyer with the FBI on a counterterrorism team, which was a great job. But I wanted to be my own boss, and I had a bunch of things I wanted to do. So I changed directions a little bit, and I had already started a business on the side as an inspirational seeker. So that is what I guess if I had one full-time job, that's it. That's definitely the focus of my attention. I travel around the country speaking to a bunch of different corporations about leadership and overcoming adversity, the upside of change, and teamwork and other Marine Corps things that we cherish in the Marine Corps and other services. I also work with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Hiring Our Heroes program. The team I'm on focuses on employment for wounded warriors and caregivers. Obviously, that's near and dear to my heart. I also have started working with another a Marine. He was a corporal in the Marine Corps and a post 9/11 vet, and we are providing training to corporations that want to hire veterans but don't really know how to do it. And so we are making a lot of videos and providing live training to help those corporations onboard veterans the right way. And I'm also halfway through a 7-month course to learn how to be a coach, because I've gone through a lot of transition in my life, which I imagine we'll talk about today, and so I want to be a transition coach. And so I've got a number of different avenues I'm pursuing. I know anyone who knows anything about business would say, Justin, you should focus on one and do it a lot better. But these are all things I'm interested in, and it's hard to say no to any of them.
Well, and when you got a passion about it, I know that makes it much easier to do too.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, let's talk about how you got to where you are, and why you like to coach and to motivate and to teach management, leadership. So tell us about what happened when you were deployed.
Yeah, sure. So I didn't deploy when I was on active duty, and I left active duty in 2004 as a captain, and I joined the reserves in 2005. And the unit I joined was here in D.C., but really it was all lawyers who were teaching the law of war and Geneva Convention and stuff like that to units that were getting ready to deploy. So in 2006, a different unit was looking for Marine officers. This was the 4th Civil Affairs Group. And so I volunteered to transfer over to that unit to deploy. And so I led a small team, and we were attached to a much larger Marine infantry battalion. We were in Al Anbar province, where a lot of the Marines were back in 06 and 07, and before that as well. And so I was not there as a lawyer, and I felt very fortunate. In fact, I think it's a highlight of my career to have the opportunity to lead Marines in a combat environment. And so I was surrounded by incredible leaders, starting with Colonel DeGrosse, the battalion commander, who's very well known in the Marine Corps, and I learned a lot from him. And our team went out on missions every day, and some of your listeners may remember that 2006 was a very kinetic time for the Marines in Iraq. And there were troops in combat every day, a lot of improvised explosive devices, a lot of firefights. We were on a combat patrol, and I was shot in the head by an enemy sniper. It will be 10 years in October. So I was incredibly fortunate to survive. The bullet hit me behind my left ear and exploded out of my face. I'm only here because a young Navy corpsman was able to somehow perform rescue breathing on me, even though the bullet went through my mouth, and then cut out my throat and performed an emergency tracheotomy so I wouldn't drown my own blood. George Grant is an incredible, well, he's not a young man anymore, it's 10 years ago. He was only 25 years old at the time. He had never done this surgery on a human being before, and the sniper was still shooting at the rest of the Marines. And he did such a perfect job. My plastic surgeon in the States told me he thought another surgeon had performed it. So he's an example of one of these amazing corpsmen and medics who we hear about or sometimes see in movies. And so obviously he's a hero to me and will always be my personal hero. So I survived that. When he rolled me over, I wasn't breathing. He saved my life. And then I've had so many other people who have helped me along the way. But I went back to work as a lawyer after I recovered about a year later, 8 months later, and stayed in the reserves for, about 6 more years. I was promoted to lieutenant colonel in 2013. That same year, I medically retired from the Marine Corps and left the FBI to move off in this completely different direction. But I'm now, are now much more in tune with challenges other people face. I've had a couple dozen reconstructive surgeries. I'm limited in some things I can do, but I feel a lot closer to people who are struggling. And let's face it, virtually all of us are struggling in one way or another at some point. I feel a lot more sympathy and empathy for others now than I ever did. I feel like I'm much more involved in helping people. So I feel like it sounds crazy, but having that near-death experience has actually resulted in me being a much better person and just being able now to provide a service to help other people. As a seeker, a lot of people come up to me and really appreciate what I talk about because I focus on taking care of each other and people out there. A lot of people are struggling who aren't as fortunate as I've been, who don't have people they can really rely on. And so I try to help a little bit with that, at least as a sounding board or providing some guidance based on what I've been through.
So how about setting up the scene here just before you were shot?
Sure.
And, really what led up to that and what happened and why did you get out of the vehicle and maybe some of the initial diagnosis?
Yeah, sure. That was typically, I should say, as a civil affairs team leader, I was expected to develop contracts with the local Iraqis there to help rebuild the destroyed infrastructure. Where we were, it was very difficult because the insurgency was very powerful. This is right before the surge of 2007. The Iraqis, the typical Iraqis were caught between a rock and a hard place, and they would, if they cooperated with us at all, they would be visited at night with very real death threats from those insurgents. So creating meaningful relationships and getting contracts was quite difficult, and a lot of what we actually saw was more combat related. But our battalion commander, Colonel Grosse, was very aggressive about being out across the wire, out in enemy territory, checking on his Marines. He had a lot of Marines at different forward operating bases, so he always wanted to have personal contact with them. So October 18 of 2006 was not very different from any other day. We made a stop at a police station, had been shot up the night before by the insurgents, so Colonel Grosse could meet with the police chief. We stopped by one of our forward operating bases to check on the Marines and make sure they were doing okay. And then we were at a third stop. And one thing that was a little bit different, we had a reporter with us. He was there from a North Carolina newspaper, and he was doing a story about Colonel Grosse and his Marines. And he and I were riding in the same vehicle, and I had noticed earlier he was standing around not moving very much, which is a terrible idea if a sniper may be targeting you. And we knew there was a sniper in the area because he had already killed a few of our Marines in the preceding 2 or 3 weeks. We had a counter sniper team out looking for him, but it wasn't until later that we actually caught him. And so we got out of the vehicle at the third stop, and we were walking away from the Humvee, and I said to Jay, hey, you need to move quicker here. We don't want something to happen to you. Don't forget about that sniper. And Jay Price's name, Jay told me later that as soon as I said that, based on that, he took a big step forward, and then immediately a bullet came in right where his head had been and hit the wall between us. And before I could react, the next round came in and hit me behind my left ear, and that's that's how I was shot. The Marines reacted perfectly. They circled the Humvees around me to provide some sort of protection. They were able to get me in the Humvee, which was very difficult considering the sniper was still shooting. Like everyone else, I was wearing 65 pounds of protective armor, so I weighed 200 pounds at the time, so that was a heavy load to get in the vehicle. And then a young corporal who I didn't know very well risked his life and drove us at 70 miles an hour to get me to the aid station so they could stabilize me. And we had a standing order then not to drive faster than 15 miles an hour because if we hit an IED going faster than that, it would cause it to flip over and kill everyone. So he risked his life for me just like Corpsman George Grant had done. They got me to the golden hour, to the aid station, what they call the golden hour, which is so critical after traumatic injury. And then the doctors were able to stabilize me and get me over to the main air base where the big emergency aid station was. So that is what led up to being injured. I don't remember. Once I was shot, they said I fought back against the corpsman. He said that I recognized something happened. I thought he was the enemy. I was aware of what was going on. I just don't remember it. I started getting my memory back about a week or two later, after I was medevac to Landstuhl, Germany, Landstuhl Hospital in Germany. It was there for 4 days. I remember about 10 seconds of that, and then woke up in the intensive care unit at Bethesda, Navy Hospital, Bethesda.
Wow. So
yeah, a lot.
So at the time, you weren't married. Who were your parents notified? Was it your fiance or your girlfriend?
Yeah. My parents were. My girlfriend, when I left for Iraq, my girlfriend left to pursue a PhD at Cambridge University in England. And so we had talked that morning, over email, and as usual, I sent her email saying we were going out on patrol, and I'll let her know when we got back. We went out on patrol probably 4 or 5 times per week. And so she was expecting another email from me, didn't receive anything, was waiting, time went on, and she was getting really nervous, and then she went to dinner, didn't hear anything back, came back, there was still no email, and then the email popped up, and she thought it was from me, but my mom's name is Judith, so it was from Judith Constantine, very similar to Justin Constantine, but it said, the subject line said, Justin is okay. And basically, they had notified my parents. They didn't have very many details. They just knew I'd been severely wounded, weren't sure of the diagnosis or prognosis at all. And then my mom forwarded that to my girlfriend, Dahlia. My parents quickly got more information from the unit and from other friends of ours who were over there who learned about it, because it made a big splash over there. I was a major at the time. Not many officers of that rank have been injured the same way I was, typically as maybe a lance corporal or a corporal. So a lot of people had heard about that major who was shot in the head. A lot of people thought I'd been killed. So there were several people talking to my parents. Dahlia, because she was in England, was able to come to Landstuhl pretty easily. Typically, service members don't get personal visitors there unless it's a worst-case scenario. But since she was already in Europe, she got there. She was there for 4 days, and then they decided to send me on to Bethesda. And at that point, Dahlia decided to leave her PhD, even though she was in the very beginning stages, and even though it was a lifelong dream of hers to go there, she left it to come be with me in the hospital, even though we weren't married. And having her there with me was the number one factor in me having a successful recovery. I can say that hands down. Having someone next to you at a time like that who loves you and is just there to take care of you makes all the difference. And I saw plenty of Marines who didn't have that, and life was hard. I mean, a hospital is a lonely place, especially at night when all the visitors go away, and it can be tough in there. And so I saw a lot of Marines struggling. I helped them as much as I could, but I was in a bad way myself. But having Dahlia there, and then when I went home, I was an outpatient. She was there every day for me. And then I proposed to her the next year. We got married 2 years later. But I had said to her, look, we're not married. You don't have to be here for this. You certainly didn't sign up for this. And she said, are you crazy? I wouldn't be anywhere else. And that made all the difference. And I'll just say that I have an incredible respect for caregivers, and because I've been a very lucky beneficiary of one. But a lot of the American public, I think, isn't aware of how much of their lives the caregivers put on hold and how much they sacrifice for our wounded warriors. And so if that's one thing your listeners take away, I hope is that you recognize how important caregivers are. In my case, for a wounded warrior, but really it's for anyone who's suffering a disease or going through a tough time.
Yeah, I can imagine that most people don't even think about that, of what caregivers go through. And
right.
I mean, how did she deal with it? Because I would imagine it wasn't all, and I know it wasn't easy for her, even emotionally and on the relationship. So how did she deal with the
Yeah, it was difficult because she's from the West Coast. Dahlia's from California, so She had never heard of Bethesda, Maryland, where the hospital was. Certainly didn't know anyone. I mean, we were fortunate that my family lived nearby. I'm from this area anyway. And my best friend from law school's parents live right down the street from the hospital. So they were gracious enough to let Dahlia live there while I was in the hospital. So that made a huge difference, too. Back in 2006, things weren't very good at the hospital as far as just taking care of the warriors, having dependents there, having a caregiver there, providing for them, making sure they were okay. Things have come a long way, but it was a different time then. And so, once we went home, and I was in the hospital for 2 months, and then they said, you can go home and get better probably at home where it's a lot quieter, you can sleep a lot more and all that. And they showed Dahlia how to take care of my mouth and do everything she needs to do. And it was actually a very bonding experience for us being together all the time, of course. But I had post-traumatic stress, and it started to come out after a while. And, I was a jerk. And when we identified I had post-traumatic stress, then she helped me get care and really encouraged me to get care. She knew a lot about post-traumatic stress because she's a teacher and she had studied this in some of her classes. But she didn't need to get care herself, although plenty of caregivers do, and fortunately there are services that provide that. But Dahlia has a strong family. She, talks to her parents every day, and so that was part of it. But she was here alone. She really shouldered the burden. She's quite close with my mom now, and then my friend's mother, who she lived with, she's quite close with her too. And so really somehow she was able to put her needs on the back burner and put everything on the back burner for me, which I think is harder than actually recovering from the injury. Like, for instance, I was in a coma for over a week, and of course, I was unaware I was in a coma the whole time. I didn't know what was going on, but she and my family had to sit there and look at me and watch and not know if I would ever talk again or what was going on. So I think for her and for other caregivers, life is often much more challenging than it is for the wounded warrior, him or herself.
Yeah, I mean, she sounds like a rock star.
She's incredible, yeah.
So at what point did you realize that you could take the injury and inspire others because of that? Or was it before that even?
No, nothing before that. It wasn't for quite some time. I mean, it wasn't like as if I left the hospital after 2 months, went home, and I was good to go. I mean, I was an outpatient for 7 months after that, and I would go to the hospital every couple of weeks for more surgeries, and like I said, I have a couple dozen now at this point. So that took quite some time. And I can remember having a really rough day. I was in the shower, and I guess I looked down, saw all the scars on my legs where they'd taken bones from my legs to use in reconstructing my upper lower jaw, and was just having a lot of trouble talking, and I couldn't really eat normally anymore. I was on a feeding tube for a long time, and I just kind of broke down and had a real rough day, and but then just came to terms with the fact that, I'm now disabled, but that's okay. Life is going to be a lot different. I'm on a different trajectory now. I didn't know what that was, but I just kind of came to terms with it and said, you know what, I'm a Marine officer. I have a lot to give still. I have a lot of skills that I have, and I want to do well at whatever I do. And that kind of motivated me to get back to work and work hard, and I did. When I went back to work at the Department of Justice, I was working there full time, drilling in the reserves. I was also going on as a reservist at Marine Corps Command and Staff College, and I started a small business. And so I just really threw myself into what I was doing. I told myself, look, life is short. Life could go away in an instant. Do what you want to do things really well, and don't waste any time. And that was kind of my mentality, and still is now to this day. As far as your question about being an inspirational speaker, that didn't occur to me until, maybe 5 years after I was injured, and I was asked to speak at a couple Marine Corps birthday balls, and I was honored to do that, and they went very well. And then I was asked to speak at some other veterans things, and then a gentleman who I got to know invited me to come to a event up in the Poconos, and they have a group called the Tri-State Troopers, which is made up of state troopers from Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York, and there's a lot of military veterans who are state troopers. And every year they have an event to honor those who were killed in the line of duty, the fallen troopers. And they raise a lot of money to give to one family from each state who has kids, and it goes into a college fund for them. So he asked me to come be a speaker, and I said, of course I'll do that. And he said, what's your speaking fee? And I said, well, can you pay for my gas money to drive from Virginia to Pennsylvania? And he said, yeah, we'll cover your gas and we'll have something for you. So I showed up, and he had an envelope full of cash, and it was like $1,000. It was very generous to them. I didn't expect anything like that. And obviously they had passed a hat and collected that, and it meant a lot to me. And from there I thought, you know what, maybe I can do this part-time. Maybe I can make a business, and it's really therapeutic way for me to talk about things I've gone through. I get the benefit of helping other people along the way. And it just started, kind of like your podcast. It's starting piece by piece, start nowhere, and you grow and grow, and one success begets more success. And to the point where a couple of years later, as I said, I left being a lawyer and started doing it full time because I realized I was having a good enough income, not just to supplement now, but to be my full-time income. So it took a couple of years. It wasn't something I ever imagined, but I really, really enjoy it now, and I really love the opportunities to go and speak around the country.
Yeah, it really does serve multiple purposes, because you're able to, it's, as you said, therapeutic to you,
right? And
you're helping others at the same time. So, I think everybody likes to talk and people like to share about their trials and how they overcome. Maybe not everybody, but I think most people do.
Well, you're right. When I almost always, when I go speak at an event, large or small, of course I'll wait around and talk to whoever wants to talk to me afterwards and take pictures and all that. There's always people who quickly tell me about a challenge that they've gone through, whether it was cancer or loss of a loved one, or just their kid going off to college, and now they're in a different space, and they appreciate the message because what I say helps put their problems in perspective, and they know that they may have not been talking with someone else yet, but now they're going to start talking to people because they can see the benefit.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, you mentioned earlier about the upside of change. That was one phrase that kind of stuck out to me. What really is the upside to change?
Well, I guess as a backdrop, I should say, and this, is that we're surrounded by change all the time. There's always change going on. It would be impossible to live in a world without change, and so I know that change can be difficult and challenging for people, especially if it's in the workplace and you have to change the way you do things. But without change, we wouldn't have innovation, we wouldn't have progress, we wouldn't be moving forward. And so, as I alluded to earlier, I'm on a whole different path than I was before. And before I was fine. I was a lawyer. I worked for the government on a mission I really appreciated. Life was good, but life is a lot better now, and that's because of the personal side and because of the change I've gone through that got me there. And so one of the chapters in my book, and something I talk about a lot, is that change is good. And now, I don't mean that every single change you bump up against is awesome. Like, obviously there's sad things, like getting shot is a sad thing, but then after that, and of course it's smart and okay to grieve and think deeply about things and talk and journal and stuff like that and meditate. But we can all learn from whatever trial we've been through. I've learned a lot about myself and about taking care of others and appreciating every day. And so I have a much, I feel like a much more intentional lifestyle now than I did before. And while I would never wish to get shot or have an injury like this, I'm in a much better place, as odd as it sounds. And so when I talk about change is good, I'm bringing that from a very personal level. I know there's a lot of other folks out there who talk about it much more professionally and how that means you're making a better business. And I do touch on that when I talk, but really for me, it's just how I believe I've matured as a person and grown as a person because of the change that was thrust upon me.
So I'm wondering, I'm guessing you speak to large and small groups.
Yeah, across the spectrum.
Okay. Is there a difference that you see in maybe how management, top level, or people who are managers respond to you versus, maybe those not in management positions, how they respond to what you're teaching or speaking on?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I typically have close interaction with the senior leaders, whether it's of the whole organization. For instance, when I spoke at Michael's, the craft store, at their annual leadership conference 2 years ago, I coordinated closely with the CEO, and we got along great, and we stayed in touch. So whether it's the senior leadership of the whole company or a particular division, or whether it's a little bit farther down the chain and it's just the leader of that small group where I'm seeking. So I've connected with at all levels of leadership. But because I will typically go out to dinner with them or have several phone calls with them, meet with them the day of, they're the ones who introduce me. I have a connection with them and plenty of time for one-on-one discussions leading up to the actual presentation. So they've already, and these are decision makers, so they already made a choice to hire me and bring me in, and so they're vested in my success as well. So those conversations, those interactions always go well because we've had a chance to get to know each other. The other side, where it's just the folks who are in the audience, whether they're leaders or not, I only know if we actually have a chance to talk afterwards. But I always will connect with 10 or 15 people at least, and even if it's just walking to the back of the room or having a drink of water afterwards or staying around. And I talk about what I know about. I don't pretend to know about sales or driving growth or something like that. So I stay in my lane. I talk about my experiences and my thoughts and how I put it all together. So I'm an authentic seeker because I don't pretend to be something I'm not. Some people don't want to hire me because I can't talk about certain things, and that's exactly right. They shouldn't. So I've seen the connections on a mid-level manager level all the way to the CEO. And really, to get to your question, they're really not that different. Maybe a CEO is looking out for the good of his or her whole company, and a mid-level manager is looking out for their team. But everyone wants the same thing there at work. They want success of their team, however you define that. They want to be more productive and more efficient. They want their employees to recognize their true potential and their true value. And they want, at the end of the day, they want to provide good service to their customers and be known for being a first-class organization. And so that's what I help them with.
Okay, very interesting. Random thought, since you meet so many people and work with so many people.
Sure.
How do you remember names well?
Pretty well. I mean, not perfectly. Some guys, or some men and women can, snap a finger and know everyone in the room. I'm pretty good at it, and I try to follow up with people. If someone gives me a card, I'll connect with them on LinkedIn or maybe drop them a line. At least I know who they were, and I make notes on my business cards of who this person was. So I do a pretty good job, but usually I'm not too scared to say, I hate to say this, I don't remember your name. And people understand because they know if I'm there talking to 2 or 3 or 500 people that I'm going to forget some people's names.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've really been working on that for at least 20 years. I mean, and I don't feel like I've improved. I'm aware of it, but what stinks is I could be talking to someone who I know. I mean, I've dealt with, I know their name, I've dealt with them for a long time. All of a sudden, boom, the name goes. And I mean, if it's someone I don't know that well, I don't have a problem telling them, hey, I'm sorry, I know exactly who you are, but I just don't remember your name.
Right. Well, if you read Dale Carnegie's, making friends and influencing people. He says in there, people's favorite word is their name. So you got to work on that, Thad.
That's exactly right, and that's one of my favorite books too.
Yeah, it's a great book.
And usually, what I'll do when I meet someone, even if I know they know me, I'll usually say my name again. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt because I'm not offended if they don't remember my name because I probably don't remember theirs, unfortunately.
I'm the exact same way. I just, you and I have been in the same position where people have come up to us and we didn't know their name. So I'm very much aware of that, and I'll just say, hey, Tad, I'm Justin. We talked at whatever. Hey, I just want to follow up with you on this, and just to get it out there.
Yeah. Okay. Good thoughts.
Yeah.
So, how do you? Someone asked me recently to speak at a high school, and for Veterans Day, I don't think I can do it because of my schedule. But I got to thinking, I don't know if I could keep their attention. I mean, what do you do with high schoolers, or is it different at all for you?
I haven't spoken to a ton of high schools. I've spoken to some sports teams at high schools and colleges, and so I guess that's a good representation. But I think you have to be able to talk for about, and I talk to even elementary school kids, and so way low grades. But I think if you're talking to a high school group, you should probably cap it at about 20 minutes, maybe a little bit more. But I just think that you're right on. People's attention span, and frankly, a lot of adults are like this now too, that attention span just isn't what it used to be. And so I don't think it's something, if you're going into a high school and you want to make an impact, and I used to go to a high school out here in Virginia once a year, a school that had a lot of students that it was a special school for students who were struggling in one way or another. And I went 3 or 4 years in a row, and I practiced for that just like I would for a corporate event because I didn't want to waste those kids' time. And so I did 20, 25 minutes talking about my background and how I thought, my thoughts about their success. I try to make it all about them and how they could benefit from my experience. More about them, less about me. And that's how I would take it. But I wouldn't encourage anyone who's going to do one of these events to treat it as something you can just wing or just get there and talk, because kids will figure it out in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Well, you talked about the 20 to 25 minutes, and I know you spoke at a TEDx event or TED event.
Right,
so, right. They're very specific. It's 18 minutes. Is that right?
18 minutes max. Mine was about 12 minutes. I've done several. I'm getting ready to go do one for Zillow down in Austin next month. But 12 minutes. I've done 12 minutes and 9 minutes. And they said, guys who were telling me, they said about 6 or 7 minutes is a sweet spot. That's where you really want to be. I don't know how valid that is. I've seen ones that are playing longer, but you're right. You can't go more than 18, and you have no notes. So really, the shorter you can make it, probably easier on yourself anyway.
Well, I actually haven't watched any of your TED speeches, but
man,
I don't know why it's on your email signature. So I've watched several other things, but
that's
I will.
Okay.
In fact, Johnny told me, he's like, "Did you watch his TED speech?" And I said, "No, I haven't watched it yet." So I definitely will.
I try to make it interesting. Because I talked about, my story, but I also talked about a friend of mine who is a Vietnam veteran and Congressional Medal of Honor recipient named Colonel Leah Thorsness, who was a prisoner of war in Vietnam for 6 years. And I also talked about a woman who's a a woman who was my realtor in New York, my broker, who overcame many significant challenges in life, and then went on to form a nonprofit to help thousands of people after Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. So I wanted to show the audience that, yes, I've been through something tough and come out stronger on the other side, but here's 2 other folks who I've happened to bump into, and chances are you know someone who's done something like this also. And so we all can do great things in life.
Well, not just anyone is invited to speak at those events. So clearly, you're very effective in what you do.
Thank you.
What limitations do you have now?
I guess I'd love to say, there's nothing I can't do. Sky's the limit. But the reality is, physically, the doctors took bones out of my legs to reconstruct my upper and lower jaw, so I can't run anymore. So that's a bummer. But instead, I swim and ride the elliptical machine and maybe do spinning and yoga and stuff like that. So there's always a workaround and lift weights. Speaking wise, I have obviously some limitations. I'm sure I'm not seeing perfectly clearly right now. I'm missing most of my upper teeth. But really, what the biggest thing in that regard is that I can't help drooling because I'm missing the end of my tongue, and my mouth is fantastic a job the doctors did. My mouth, the shape of it just doesn't block all the saliva. So eating is very messy. I have to wear a bib or a big napkin every time I go somewhere. So even though it's been 10 years, it's still really embarrassing, and it's just a real pain in the butt. And so I guess, someone could say, just get over it and deal with it. But it's just, there's some things we can't get past, maybe. And that's my thing is the drooling. And because I have a lot of nerve damage in my face from the injury, so I can't tell if there's like food on my face or if there's drool on my chin, and so those things are very embarrassing for me. But that's that. But as far as post-traumatic stress goes, I went to counseling for a year and a half. And that went very well. I still take and I should say, Given Hour is the organization I went to, which provides free mental health care for post 9/11 vets and their families. And that was a fantastic service. I still involved with a few different post-traumatic stress organizations. But work-wise, I can do anything. I might have to look down my notes once in a while when I'm giving a presentation because I do have a slight traumatic brain injury, but no one seems to care about that. I'm running my own business and doing pretty well at it. There's always room to improve, of course. But I found that once you identify what your blind spots are, what your weak points are, and just work on those, the sky is the limit. Of course, I spend a lot of time, like every night, I prepare my to-do sheet for the next day, so I don't just spin around being very busy but not very productive. I want to make sure I'm using my time very wisely. I listen to a lot of experts and what they say. My wife helps me a lot, so it's not a one-man show. One of the things I talk about that is it's okay to ask for help and lean on others for support. And I talk a lot about that, and I practice that too. I ask for help when it's warranted. I think it's okay to do that because I like helping other people, and I think other people like helping me when I need it too.
Yeah, I think people like to be needed or to feel needed.
Yeah. And I'm happy, like, say a veteran contacted me on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'd love to talk to you about transition. I'm in New York City. You want me for coffee? I would do that in a heartbeat. Of course I would. And so I feel like most people probably have that same mentality. Maybe they have to move things around their schedule or whatever, but I think most of us want to help each other in some capacity. And so that's why I encourage others to do that.
Well, what was the hardest part of your recovery? Or, was it something different than you've already mentioned? I guess it's really a combination of things I've already mentioned, that probably just adapting, to what they say, your new normal, and just getting used to what life was going to be like. Looking different, talking differently, having some challenges there. Knowing that I couldn't come back on full-time status as a Marine Corps was tough to swallow. I stayed in the Marines, but I was on limited duty, and so that was, I can't see out of my left eye, and I can't run, and so I can't do a lot of things that Marines need to be able to do. So I guess just getting used to what my new life was going to be like, which isn't really different than someone who maybe gets divorced, or like I said earlier, their kids leave and go to college or move away, or whatever big life change. Other people have been in similar ones. And so I remind myself of that everyone has overcome challenges. Everyone has fought their share of battles. We're surrounded by successful people. So there's no reason I can't do the same thing. Wow. So what do you have some strengths now that you feel like you didn't have before the injury?
Well, and I kind of touched on this earlier, but I would say one is that I'm really interested in other people. Obviously, I want to help other people. I particularly want to help veterans with employment and with issues they're facing in their personal lives. But my feelings aren't limited to veterans. I really like hearing other people's stories. I feel because I spent so much time thinking and writing about this, I know we can benefit as a society and as a culture from hearing what other people have gone through and how they've thrived in the face of adversity. And so I like listening to other people. And I'm also, like, I live in Manhattan, and right up on our street there's a homeless couple, and they're always there, and we try to help them however we can. But I enjoy the opportunity to listen to them because I learn a little bit from them, but it also makes me aware of challenges, significant challenges that others are facing that, but for the grace of God, I'm not facing. So it's a good reminder to me of how lucky I am, despite what I've been through.
Well, yeah. We don't have a lot of time left. I'd like to. There's several other things that I know that we could have talked about. I know you do a lot of work for veterans, and you mentioned some of that. And you've I don't know, received many honors and recognitions, and introduced George W. Bush, and
right.
You've got a book out, My Battlefield, Your Office. Do you mind explaining that? And if you can, talk about your new upcoming book too.
Oh, well, yeah, thank you for that. Last year I wrote a business leadership book, as you said, My Battlefield, Your Office, and it's available on Amazon, or mybattlefieldyouroffice.com is my page for it. And basically, I took Marine Corps leadership principles and applied it to the private sector, because there are millions of mid-level managers and supervisors who have worked really hard, done a great job, been promoted, but never learned how to lead people along the way. And so that's what the focus of this book is. A lot of other military folks talk about, they write books about they're good for executives or C-suite people. That's not my background, so I can't write about that. But I do know mid-level management. And so that was the focus of that book, and it's done quite well. And I've been invited to do book talks around the country as well, which I really enjoyed. In fact, I asked President Bush to write an endorsement for the book, and he said he doesn't do this for anybody, but I did have someone from the Bush Institute write one, and he and I we see each other at a lot of events, and so he actually, after the book was published, he asked me about it and asked how I was doing, so I felt pretty good that he even remembered that. But the second book I'm writing, and Johnny Yellick, who we talked about earlier, is in the book. It's an inspirational book, and I'm profiling 10 warriors who fought and were injured in Vietnam, Bosnia, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And it's going to be called something along the lines of American Inspiration, 10 Reasons Why You Can Overcome Any Adversity, or something along those lines. And each of those reasons, of course, I'll have a chapter dedicated to one warrior. So it'll be 10 chapters about their stories, how they overcame, what happened to them, and what we can all learn from them. And then a couple of chapters of my thoughts about all this, and some inspiration in there from me as well. So I'm working on that now. I've interviewed all the veterans, and now I'm doing the hard part of writing the book. So I'll publish that next year, which I'm excited about too, because it's 10 people who are just like Johnny, who have had some horrific things happen to them, but now are helping others and doing incredible things for our country.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, in the show notes, I'll have a link to your website, and
okay,
I'll do
great.
both. I'll put your My Battlefield, Your Office link as well, and
okay.
Anything in closing about you and how to find you also?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Real quick, as far as finding me, of course, my website's easiest, just justinconstantine.com. And you can learn more about me, and there's ways to contact me there. course, my TED Talk is on there and some other videos, but I'm on LinkedIn, so I hope your listeners feel if they want to connect more, we can connect through LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook and building those all the time. But really, one last thing I would like to leave the listeners with is, and this is something I talk about a lot, and this is what the TED Talk really was, which is you're stronger than you think you are. And part two of that would be you can overcome any obstacle that you face in life. And I truly believe that because I've been through it. And I think we're stronger than we think we are because most of us have never really been tested all the way. And when you dig deep, you find resources that you may not have known you had before. Personal resources, whether it's and I know so many wounded warriors who have been through similar recoveries where you fight through it. And like when I started walking again, first I had one of those it's not a chain, it's like one of those push things. And so I would walk to the bathroom in my room and back, and then to the door of the room and back, and then down the hall, and every step, every day a little bit more. So there's those kinds of resources, your own personal fortitude, and then there's the people around you, and then there's people who you reach out to out of the blue. But everyone's stronger than they think they are, and when you're having a tough day, it's important to remember that, and important to remember that if you do buckle down, you're going to overcome whatever that challenge is in front of you. And I'll end this with a joke that, and this is something my dad said to me when I was very early on, when I was injured. I was still hooked up to a lot of machines. And remember, I'm a lawyer, but I did not deploy as a lawyer. But my father came in and sat down with a very serious look on his face, and he said, "See," I guess he summarized the universal feelings for all attorneys. And he said, "See, Justin, even in Iraq, they know who the lawyers are." And so it was, tough love in the Constantine house. But I figured that if we could laugh at whatever we were going through, anyone at some point can look back and laugh at the trials and tribulations they've had. And it is possible to always look on the bright side of things.
Great way to end it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, it's a long-winded answer to your question, but it's an important point.
No, that's fantastic. I know you. I think you've got another meeting here in a few minutes, but I would like to the listeners, please share the podcast, and I hope you found even half as much inspiration in this as I have with Justin, and please subscribe, like it, share it, and I think obviously anyone could benefit from listening to Justin here and looking him up online, his TED Talk. And I'll connect with you on LinkedIn, too, if you don't mind, Justin.
Sounds great, of course. And I'll help you, just like I'll help any of your listeners. If there's anything you think I can help you with, please let me know.
Thank you very much.